Hey, everybody. Welcome to Moment of Clarity. Huge news. As you may have heard, Julian Assange will not be extradited. The ruling came down from the British courts. Judge Barretser said that Julian Assange should not be extradited to the United States for further torture. Now, there's a lot more details to this ruling. That is the bright side. That is the big point. That is the headline. Julian Assange should not and will not be extradited. The U.S. will appeal this ruling. At least they've claimed they will so far. I'm going to play clips here in a moment via Democracy Now! Clips of British Ambassador Craig Murray and as well as Julian Assange's partner and mother of his two children, Stella Morris. Their responses to this ruling, which kind of caught everybody by surprise because this judge throughout this trial and the entire British judicial system, as would be the case in America, was as terrible as you can imagine. Pro-empire, pro-government, the case that the U.S. government was making against Assange, really not allowing him to properly prepare a defense, et cetera, really making this as hard as possible for Julian Assange, who has been in some form of solitary confinement basically for 9 years, 7 of those in the Ecuadorian embassy before the president of Ecuador turned on him and allowed the British police to go into the Ecuadorian embassy, which is supposed to be considered sovereign territory, and arrest Julian Assange, dragging him out of the embassy in order to take him to what is called the British version of Guantanamo Bay, basically the worst prison in all of the UK. At least that's how many have described it. Usually, maximum security. And some point that's always good to remind you is that within 2 weeks of when Ecuador, President Moreno decided to allow Julian Assange to be grabbed, to be kidnapped, to be arrested by the UK authorities, Ecuador was given over $4 billion by the International Monetary Fund of loans. So nice little deal was made there. Anyway, all that time, the 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy, the 2 years in Belmarsh prison adds up to 9 years that Julian Assange has been tortured for the crime of journalism. He has not been freed yet, and it seems that many are very hopeful that he will be freed on bail Wednesday, when his defense has said they will be, presenting their case for why Assange should be freed pending appeal. And I think many are hopeful that he will be freed Wednesday, but I approach a lot of this with a lot of skepticism. At no point has these things gone as any other regular trial would go. So I don't know. And I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't seem, even the lawyers I've seen speaking about this don't seem quite certain as to what the odds are that Assange would be free as the appeals process goes through, but free starting Wednesday. But either way, I want to get to some more of what this judge said in this decision, which was largely horrible. But at the very end, she said, however, we will not extradite Julian Assange, basically because the U.S. prison system is so horrific, is so terrible, is so disgusting that it is quite likely he would take his own life in the U.S. prison system. This is similar to a decision that was brought down against hacktivist Lowry Love in 2016. The UK courts did a similar thing where they basically said, oh yeah, we agree with everything the U.S. is demanding and declaring, but we're not going to extradite him because the U.S. prison system is uniquely horrible and could cause the death of this prisoner. Anyway, I want to share with you what Ambassador Craig Murray said outside of the courthouse after this decision was made. Craig Murray, former ambassador for the UK, but has been a staunch proponent of Julian Assange, ally, and really has been writing great stuff about it, while our mainstream media has just been an utter pile of shit on this topic. Craig Murray, and so have our politicians in the U.S. and in the U.K., but Craig Murray has been wonderful. And let's share that video here.
Today we are swept away by our joy at the fact that Julian will shortly be with us. We have a judgment which I think makes an excuse to deliver justice, an excuse based on the appalling conditions in American prisons, an excuse based on the effect that would have on American mental health, and perhaps a sign that the authorities are not prepared to follow through the persecution and destruction of a man for political reasons.
Julian.
Now, so yeah, a couple of thoughts on what Craig Murray just said. I hope he made it clear that the reason he's calling it an excuse to not extradite, an excuse to not continue to torture Julian Assange, is basically, it seems the UK was looking for an out. They didn't want to extradite Assange because it sets a horrific precedent in so many ways. This is a journalist who, like I said, has been tortured in one form or another for 9 years. So they use this as kind of an out. It's a little loophole. Well, he's and by the way, it very well could be true as well. Julian Assange is depressed, has been depressed throughout this. I mean, who wouldn't be depressed in that situation? But they said it's quite likely that he would attempt to take his own life if he were extradited to the U.S. And Craig Murray meant this was an excuse in that this court, along with, of course, the U.S. prosecutors, have been horrific in what they've been arguing, what the court has allowed to be argued, horrific in their treatment of Assange, horrific in what they've not allowed Assange's defense to do, such as meet with him regularly, take notes regularly. Assange has been kept from preparing himself for this trial, going into it, and speaking to his defense team on a regular basis. Motherfucker, censor lights. Even the lights are against us on this. And so this is kind of an excuse for them not to extradite. But within her ruling, within Judge Baritzer's ruling, is just tons of garbage. As she was going down through each of the things, and I'm looking to other people who were in the courtroom and people who were able to cover it live, that she agreed with everything that the U.S. prosecution, the U.S. government was alleging. She agreed that the U.S. can do this, that the U.S. has the right to go into another country, demand the arrest of a journalist, and then demand they be extradited to the U.S. to be further prosecuted, which, of course, is horrific to begin with. She basically agreed that journalism is a crime in this case. She didn't, of course, use those words because they want to put caveats on it. But the reason Obama and his Justice Department did not bring these charges, similar charges to what the Trump Justice Department and his administration have brought, is because they decided that there's no way to bring these charges and differentiate between what Assange did and what journalism is, or what being a publisher is. And so by doing this, by having this prosecution, you are basically just admitting that journalism is a crime when the empire, when the ruling elite, when the ruling class decides it's a crime. We don't like what you publish, so now journalism is a crime, which of course is supposed to be the opposite of the freedom of press we're supposed to have in the United States. And so it is horrific. But by allowing all of this, by allowing this argument, and by basically agreeing that it was fine and just, the judge is laying the groundwork for this to be done more often. The idea, obviously, is the U.S. government wants to create a chilling effect on journalism, similar to what Julian Assange did on revealing the crimes of our government, obvious war crimes. And by the way, you might have wrong shoulder. You might have noticed the poster behind Craig Murray, which, along with a little help from Lucy Dyer, we created on Redacted Tonight, and I'm glad to see it's getting around the world. But the judge also acknowledged that Assange would get a fair trial in the U.S., which is laughable. No one that even is willing to be even remotely intellectually genuine, give it a fair intellectual logic thought process would come up with the idea that Julian Assange could get a fair trial. Okay, he would be tried in right here in Northern Virginia in the same court that tried John Kiriakou and other whistleblowers. Now, Julian Assange is not a whistleblower; he's a publisher. Important distinction there. And you can hear from John Kiriakou, who revealed the U.S. torture program and how horrific this court system is, and the type of trial that Assange would get. He would not be allowed to bring in evidence, basically. He would not be allowed to prepare an effective defense. He would not be allowed to use the necessity defense, that the crimes he revealed were of such a grand level that they had to be revealed, and it was in the public interest that these crimes be revealed. He would not be allowed to do that. And ultimately, they would hope to force him into some sort of plea deal where he agrees to not have the death penalty, and therefore he'll be locked away for takes a plea deal where he's locked away forever, or locked away for 30 years, or whatever horrific plea deal they would try and give him. Kiriakou ultimately spent over a year in prison, something like that. Maybe it was even 2 years. But agreed to a plea deal, even though he didn't agree he had done anything wrong. He didn't agree he was guilty of anything. But he had to agree to a plea deal because he wasn't allowed to create a defense. And so it was basically disagree with, don't sign the plea deal and spend decades in prison, or sign the plea deal and serve a couple of years in prison. He basically had no choice. And that's what they would hope to do to Assange, but not a couple of years. They'd probably lock him up for decades. But anyway, it's the most horrific lack of justice, injustice system that would try Julian Assange in the United States. And this judge in the UK said, I disagree with all the arguments that Assange wouldn't get a fair trial. He would absolutely get a fair trial, which, again, just laughable. And then, a final point is that she claimed that it was not his defense, Assange's defense, says that he's being prosecuted for political reasons, right? How much more obvious could it be that there are political reasons for prosecuting Julian Assange right now? They hated what he revealed. They're upset with him for revealing the crimes of the U.S. government. That is why they came after him. No other reason. If he revealed the crime, and by the way, he revealed crimes of governments around the world, but this has to do with the U.S. versus Assange. But if he had revealed the crimes of a mafia group in Italy, or something completely unrelated, then I don't think the U.S. would be going after him like this, would they? No, they're going after him because they're furious at what he revealed of them, that they are criminals. And therefore, it is a politically motivated persecution. It couldn't be more obvious. You've got Hillary Clinton on record saying that Assange should be drone bombed. It couldn't be more obvious. Yet here you have this judge in the UK saying, no, it's not a political persecution at all. So my point is, and others have made this point, that her decision is horrific on so many levels and lays a groundwork for the prosecution and persecution of media figures and media outlets that is terrible and upsetting and infuriating. And yet, at the very end of this decision, she gives a monster, a giant silver lining that we can all celebrate, which is that Julian Assange will not be extradited. Of course, the U.S. will appeal that, or they say they will. And like I said at the beginning, I don't know if what the odds are he gets released Wednesday during the appeals process. But obviously, we're all fighting for that. The fight is not over. Even if he were released Wednesday, the fight still wouldn't be over, because then you've got to fight for him to maintain his freedom during the appeals process. I want to play one more clip. This is Assange's partner, mother of his two children, Stella Morris, and she has been steadfast in her support of him and really amazing in her fight for him. So I will show you that.
Assange's partner, Stella Morris, also spoke shortly after the judge's ruling.
I had hoped that today would be the day that Julian would come home. Today is not that day, but that day will come soon.
Yeah.
As long as Julian has to endure suffering in isolation as an unconvicted prisoner in Belmarsh prison, and as long as our children continue to be bereft of their father's love and affection, we cannot celebrate. We will celebrate the day he comes home. Today is a victory for Julian. Today's victory is the first step towards justice in this case. We are pleased that the court has recognized the seriousness and inhumanity of what he has endured and what he faces. But let's not forget, the indictment in the US has not been dropped. We are extremely concerned that the US government has decided to appeal this decision. It continues to want to punish Julian and make him disappear into the deepest, darkest hole of the US prison system.
So that was Stella Morris, Assange's partner. As she said, you can't celebrate yet. He's not out of prison. Even when he gets out of prison, the fight will continue. And however, I just want to say that this is still an incredible development, and you can't put put a number or an amount on how much impact all of you have had, everybody who's followed this and tweeted and written about it and talked about it and done Facebook posts about it. And one day I'm just going to take a hammer to those sensor lights. We'll see if that works. And like what everybody has done by keeping this discussion alive, by keeping this story alive, by keeping Julian Assange in the news, and Chelsea Manning. Same with Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning would have spent the rest of her life in prison if it weren't for the activism and passion and fury of all of us who cared about that story, who cared about the fact that she was a whistleblower, that she revealed war crimes, and she was being punished for it rather than the fucking war criminals. Like, she would have spent the rest of her life in prison. And it was only thanks to the activism and the just nonstop energy that has been put into this, that has been put into defending Assange's life and his freedom, that even got us to this point. Like I said, he's not free yet, but that even got us to this point. And so I think for all of you out there who have followed this story and kept talking about it and not willing to just allow your mainstream media to forget it, to erase your memory of the fact that this shit was going on, thank you. Thank you for continuing this, for keeping that energy going. Because you'll notice the mainstream media today, they've reported on this update, right? If you turn on NPR, they'd say it. If you turn on CNN or Fox News, they're going to mention that the decision came down, Assange won't be extradited. But that doesn't count as really covering this story. That doesn't count as hammering away every day. They wanted to forget Julian Assange. They wanted to bury him in a fucking cell for the rest of his life. And if he died of COVID-19, they would have celebrated. These are cowards and pathetic corporate tools, all of them. on these mainstream networks that are willing to ignore Julian Assange and ignore the revelations that he and WikiLeaks have brought forward. Not just the fact that they don't talk about him like he's a hero, which they should, but the fact that they just were willing to ignore this story is fucking pathetic. For the most part, they've ignored it. When WikiLeaks first started revealing the incredible, breathtaking crimes of our military, the mainstream media was covering it a little, right? Assange was getting awards. The Guardian was working with him. New York Times was doing stories on it. Washington Post was doing stories on it. But then they realized that it was time to get together and defend the empire and stop the coverage of what was being revealed, stop the coverage of Assange's persecution. And they did. They really got together and they said, okay, time to defend the empire. Time to stop covering what it is that WikiLeaks is revealing. And it's just been incredibly repulsive to watch these fucking clowns act like they're journalists. I remember Rachel Maddow did one story on when they brought the espionage charges against Assange. I basically, from what I've heard, she basically never mentions Assange. But when they brought the espionage charges against him, she did one little story where she says, this is dangerous to have espionage charges against a journalist or a publisher. And that was it. She felt like, oh, well, I'll cover my back. I'll cover myself by doing a little story about how they shouldn't bring espionage charges against Assange. And that's it. And it's like, that doesn't fucking do it, okay? You are a corporate clown who has not just turned your back, obviously, on all the victims of our war crimes, on all the victims of our bombs, on all the children blown to pieces. Not just turned your back on all of them, but you're even turning your back on a fellow journalist, fellow publisher who is putting out these facts. The same thing you claim to be doing. And I'm not just talking about her. I'm talking about all these goddamn mainstream media fucking shit stains. They turn their back on one of their own, even though the prosecution of him and persecution of him threatens their own goddamn career, threatens their own goddamn job. But in their mind, as long as they're basically doing the bidding of the corporate state, then they don't have to worry about ending up like Assange. Not an issue for them. They can keep collecting their paychecks and not have to worry about it. And so it's just been, really revealing, honestly. I've said this before. If you want to know which politicians probably are actually worth anything and which media figures to even remotely begin to trust, then ask where they stand on Julian Assange. Because that'll tell you. There's so few. I don't keep track of every one of them, but there's so few of our politicians. You can probably count them on one hand that have said that Assange and Snowden should be pardoned or should be free or are not criminals. It's a tiny number, and it's the same with the people on your media, on your mainstream media. And if they did defend Assange, they probably did it before they got the big job. They probably did it before they got the big call from the CNN, or the NPR. They probably did it early. And so it's just, I see some of you mentioning, speaking of mainstream media, I see some of you mentioning that I did play the clips were from Democracy Now!, and some of you are mentioning how garbage Democracy Now! Has been on Syria, and I think even on Russiagate. They really, I don't know all the reasons behind it, but I know that they somewhat fell for Trump delusion syndrome. But it's obviously more than that. There's no reason to believe every lie the State Department puts out. So I don't know what's going on over there. Probably one of the best sources for criticism of Democracy Now! Is a former producer at Democracy Now! Named Aaron Mate, who now works for the Gray Zone. who has publicly said many times and tweeted about, what the fuck are they doing over there? He worked there, and they were respected. And I used to highly respect Democracy Now! I even volunteered there, but it was like 15 years ago or something, maybe 12 years ago. And they were really good on Julian Assange. They used to have him on all the time. They used to interview him a lot. And I don't know what happened there. I don't know if it's a money issue where they started getting their money. I have no idea, but they're not what they used to be. Anyway, I think I've covered most of what I know right now about where the Assange trial stands. There's some likelihood that he could be freed on Wednesday, and let's all keep fighting for that. Don't stop the fight. Don't stop demanding that he get his freedom. And even if he is freed pending appeal, don't stop demanding that they drop the appeal and stop going after him, because this is a fucking political. I mean, yes, it's in the UK, but this is an American political prisoner. We love to act like other countries have political prisoners, right? That's not a thing we do here. Other countries have political prisoners. Bullshit. 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 We have plenty of political prisoners. Look at Mumia. Look at Stephen Donziger, the lawyer who successfully prosecuted Chevron and now has been locked in his apartment on house arrest, a New York apartment that, has like 2 rooms or something, basically equivalent to the Ecuadorian embassy. He's been locked in there for like a year and a half. I think we're going on 2 years. He's a political prisoner too. It's absolutely disgusting. And Edward Snowden is not a prisoner, but the reason he can't come home and fears for his freedom is because he's a political persecution. So we absolutely have political prisoners, political persecutions, and it's fucking repulsive. So if we want to even have a beginning of a moral, the moral high ground. Yeah, what fucking moral high ground? We have dug down below the moral high ground and like hollowed it out, some lower than you even thought we could go. Now we're claiming the moral high ground. Bullshit, okay? So anytime they want to claim, this country, that country has political prisoners, it's like, yeah, they shouldn't have them either. But don't act like you don't. And Julian Assange is a U.S. political prisoner with the cooperation of the U.K. Robin is asking if Julian is safe now. No, Julian's still in Belmarsh. Hopefully, Belmarsh prison, like the most notorious prison in the UK, and which apparently is ravaged by COVID-19. Big surprise there. Most prisons are, and we got to get him out of there. We got to get Julian Assange out of there. Of course, even if he were to walk out tomorrow, the damage that's been done to him and his life is irreparable. All right, guys, please share this. I try and do these every single weekday, except sometimes, and you can get them at leecamp.com. Because I talk about things like Julian Assange, my videos will often not be promoted or shown to you easily. So please come to leecamp.com, hit subscribe at youtube.com/momentofclarity. If you're watching this on a different YouTube channel, please come subscribe at youtube.com/momentofclarity and keep fighting for Assange. I'll see you guys tomorrow.